You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
No fooling! We're back for April Fool's Day, episode 93, Friday, April 1st, 2022. How you doing, Kristina Dennis?
I am doing very well, Damon Frank. How are you doing? It's a happy Friday, plus we have the twist of April Fool's Day. Do we still celebrate that?
April Fools. Yeah, you know what? I think you do. I don't know if you pinch people. I'm pretty sure you don't wear green. That was St. Patrick's Day. Yeah.
Nope. Everybody has to pay attention because there'll be people out there trying to fool you today.
Yes, you know what? Sometimes I feel like I'm being fooled every day, to be honest with you. Every day, sometimes lately seems like St. Patrick's Day. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to episode 93, Friday, April 1st, 2022. Damon Frank with my co-host, Kristina Dennis here. We've got a great show for you in store for you. And it's going to be a good one today. We're going to talk about something pretty kind of controversial. It's been a crazy week. So we've got our TGIF Sober segment coming up on the second part of the show. How are you doing today, though, Kristina? How's it going in Orange County?
It is beautiful. I can feel that the sun's going to come out today. We've had several days of rain, so I'm looking forward to that. And Friday just has a different feel. Even though I'm just as busy on the weekends, there's something about the ethos, where everybody gets a little more free. And I'm being a super sensitive person. I feel it. So I really always enjoy this day.
Well, I already woke up with character defects today. I already texted you 15 times. We're going to be late. We're going to be late. We're going to be late. I was only really like 3 minutes late. It was one of those where I kind of overslept. I've been working, one of the things that I've been working on that I shared in the Recovered Life discussion is one of the things I've been committing to is waking up early and just really getting this stuff going earlier in my life. Right. And every time that I don't hit that goal, if I'm not perfect about that goal, I just totally beat myself up, which is ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous, right?
Because, but
no one's perfect all the time.
Well, perfection doesn't even exist, right? And before we get started on our first segment, I want to let everybody know that this show is being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors and people like you. Make sure to like, share, follow, and leave us a comment so we can keep bringing you content. Also, visit info.recoveredlife.us. You can make a donation and you can join the network, which is completely free. No fooling there. Once again, that's info.recoveredlife.us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love Recovered Life. I was on it the other day. We were talking about the Will Smith show, the Will Smith slap, right? Which was great. Which was really great. And I had my my men's group gathering yesterday. And we were talking about impulse control. So we'll dive into that a little bit later in the next segment. But I had to bring this up. I read this Vox article, Kristina.
Yeah.
Look, I already know that this is going to get this. I'm going to get calls about this because I already know the ones that I get calls about. I got calls about the Will Smith show. I got calls about the character defect show that we did, right? If you haven't seen any of those, go back into the archives there and check them out. But this one is interesting. This is about a Vox article, and we're calling this episode Soberish, the micro-dosing trend. So we're going to talk real quick about this article that we found on Vox. And just so everybody knows, we're going to put a link to the Vox article in the show notes. But it's really about using magic mushrooms, LSD, cannabis, and to really cure, I would say, kind of mental health issues, and also people seem to be using it to try to get sober.
It's totally true. And, the article kind of brings out the therapeutic value, but also the dosing is incredibly small. And I am very curious to see how you fall on this. They did interview one recovering addict who said that it was really, really helpful because it creates a buffer. Now, that kind of language makes me think, well, that's not very sober. However, in this article, it talks about how that allowed that person to feel like they could protect their sobriety in events where people were drinking. Now, I have heard of it in lieu of antidepressants or in addition to antidepressants, because let's face it, many of us don't have the nervous system that allows us to live in this world untethered. And that's why we drink, or used. And so I am very curious to see how you fall on this subject. For me, Damon Frank, I think it's okay for some people, as long as it's medically supervised and they have tried many, many other options. I can't fault anybody who doesn't want to put a pharmaceutical in their body and feels like they can do it, but it has to be regimented.
Well, here's the deal, Kristina. I'm going to tell you one up front. I'm going to say we're not condoning this. We're not doctors. We're not. If you're out there and you're 20 years sober, we're not saying, hey, you know what, Kristina and Damon think microdosing's for you. Like we're not doing any of that, right? Like, so just to be upfront with this, because I think this is. I think we're the Siskel and Ebert about some of these topics, which is good. Like I do see my position on drugs in recovery, medical pharmaceutical drugs has changed a lot over the years. I was, I'm going to be right up front with it. I always find the topic a bit dubious.
Sure.
Because not because I don't think it works for some people. I think it does. And I know somebody specifically who has done this, that had a lot of trauma, right? They had a tremendous amount of trauma, and they were sober, but miserable for years. And they'd done everything they could.
Correct.
And under a doctor's supervision, they did this. And it did seem to have a huge positive effect on their life. So I do know somebody that this has happened to, right? It's more of a group of people that did this, and there's been a backlash for them in the recovery community because people call them not sober.
Right. We don't know enough about therapeutic dosing, unfortunately, I think, to judge that. And I'm glad that you put in the warning that we're not condoning it. But what I do know is that in the 1970s, they took it out of the medical community and scheduled it a class 1 so that it was a felony to even do the testing. So I think it's a good idea. And I think that we're going places that we haven't had access to. And we all know that the war on drugs didn't work. It started with Nixon, and every president tried to do something about it. Now, with the legalization of cannabis, now, psilocybin, people are starting to include that in their mind and being open about it. And ketamine treatments for soldiers who suffer from PTSD have helped people not to even have suicidal ideation, because sometimes we don't know what's going on in somebody's brain. And I don't think people, I think if it was a choice of whether you're going to live a pretty well-blessed life or not, I think that you should talk it over with your doctor. Absolutely.
Well, the Vox article, just to be fair, the Vox article isn't really talking about specifically people in recovery, right? Like they're talking about, but it does address it a little bit. Now, here's where I start to get, because if you've lived a life in recovery for a period of time, everybody has seen this trend. Now, I'm gonna say this because I witnessed this, right? The marijuana trend. The marijuana is going to cure everything trend, which we all saw in the recovery movement, right?
Right.
So, people that were sober, that weren't really doing the deal. They weren't
Correct.
really doing the work, right? But they were sober. Technically, they were sober as a church mouse, right? They're not doing anything as far as drugs. They decide, well, you know what? I have anxiety, so I'm going to treat it with marijuana. Now they're coming to their 12-step meeting stoned. They're stoned all the time, right? Look, we've both seen this. And then when they're confronted with it, when it's obviously a problem, they're coming back and they're saying, well, you know what? It was prescribed by a doctor.
Right.
So it can't be, like, how many times do I need to see people who had a back injury that have 10 to 15 years. And the next thing that they know, they're out on prescription drugs, and it was all given to them by a doctor.
You bring up an excellent point, Damon. It is true. There are definitely fronts or abuse happening under a medical card. We see it depicted in movies. It's funny. And if you are an addict, it is dangerous. And so I completely agree with that. I think that people need to do it, at the same time that they are seeking therapy. From what I have read about and watched, a lot of times with the ketamine, it's actually done in the office with the doctor. So it's definitely something that
Yeah.
you really need to think through and figure out.
Well, I think, we're either saying that the phenomenon of craving exists or the
Hmm.
phenomenon of craving doesn't exist. Does the phenomenon of craving not exist when it's prescribed by a doctor? No,
No.
I don't think that's the case. But I do think, now let me tell you, let me take your position a little bit here. And
Okay.
this is where I've changed a little bit, because the more I dove into 12-step
Hmm.
history of it, the more you find out that very prominent people
Right.
in the 12-step community were doing versions of this, trying to find
Exactly.
a cure for alcoholism and drug addiction in the 60s, right?
Yes.
In the
Yes.
50s, in the 70s. So this is nothing really new, really,
Right.
honestly, with addiction recovery, because people have been doing this for a period of time. So I think, in a way, it's kind of a two-sided coin. I think we're very hypocritical to say, don't try it. But then at the same time, it's like, you have to be so careful
Yes.
when making this decision.
You really do. You really do. I mean, once you have that change in your physicality, I think that the key is to have the dose be very micro. And I think that that's what happens, if you are being supervised and very careful about it. It's a dose that you take in the morning, and that's all you do. And you don't continue to go back to it and back to it, back to it. Kratom is very, very similar. I have seen people in the vein of harm reduction go from opioid use to kratom. And if it was thought out and it was true and you were working truly on your recovery, then eventually they could either have a safe use of kratom for pain, or they would get off of it. But so kratom is a plant from Southeast Asia that attaches itself to your opioid receptors. And so for people that are sticking needles in their arm with heroin, as a way to get off Oxycontin, maybe kratom is the harm reduction, the
Yeah,
safer
yeah.
place. And like
Well, we've done
everything.
this, we've done shows about, I've interviewed people, and we'll have more interviews on this, because, one of the things we're doing with the show is we're starting to bring on a lot of experts, right? It's not
Right.
just us. It's like, we're talking with a lot of experts, you and I both, in our coaching. And the thing is that, there's so much we don't know. And I think, you know, I think, in a way, we have to be open. Maybe if we're not even open for ourselves, like, for me, this is just something that I don't think I would do.
Right.
But I'm also not in that situation, right? Like, so this is the thing. I'm not in that situation where I have this complex trauma scenario where it's ruining my life. I can't get out of bed, right? Like, and so there are people that are going through that in recovery, and we're talking with them, and I do see the whole thing with trauma, uh, you know, evolve. Like, look,
Yes.
Kristina, we've talked about this before. If in the 90s, even in the mid 90s or late 90s, if we were to say, let's talk about trauma and recovery, people would laugh at you. I
Yes,
mean,
they
if we
would.
said, let's talk about sugar in recovery,
Oh,
people
people
would
would
laugh
really
at you.
laugh. That's right. We have evolved as a species, and it's great to see that also, come into the sober communities to have these conversations. I remember last year when the Demi Lovato documentary came out, there were many, many discussions about California sober, and there were a lot of people throwing in their 2 cents. And I feel like, as long as we approach it with compassion and empathy, and not sign off on it, let it be that person's decision with a medical professional, then we shouldn't, we can figure out what's the safest way with somebody. My fear is that if they don't share, that they might, commit suicide. If they're at that place, I want them to take care of themselves. And I think the more we discuss it outside of the rooms, the more we open it up, I think the better.
Well, I think, to be honest, we did shows about the California sober thing. And one of the things that was damaging is, one was the whole thing about California. Look, there are people that are not California sober in California, right? So
True.
it's like, look, like, everybody who was sober in California was drinking on the side. It was just some sort of label. Here's the thing with California sober. See, I have an opposite opinion on California sober. I thought California sober was incredibly damaging. And I think it was misleading. And I think
Mhm.
what they did is they used celebrity. And I think now if we were to go back, she'd probably have, believe she has a different opinion on it. She
Yes, she
believes
does.
that she didn't. I don't want to quote her, but I believe what I read is that she does not think that that was a good idea now.
No.
And I'll tell you why I think that that was so dangerous is because she's making some sort of medical thing. It's like, no, I can do this and people in recovery can do this, when clearly the data is that if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, you cannot use socially.
Yes.
Like, how many people do you know who were drug addicts that can use drugs socially? I know one person. I
Really?
do know one person. Yeah, I do know one
Wow.
who's
I
actually in the medical field. But
oh,
I even find that, I even find that honestly, and I know the person fairly well. I even find that dubious because
true.
I don't totally believe it.
Right, right. And I think that you going back to your phenomena of craving, I wouldn't want to live with the phenomena of craving. And, I really wouldn't. I remember those days where I could never and knew from the beginning there was no way I could drink socially. It wasn't, oh, she was a party girl and went wild. So I know a lot of people who did a bunch of partying and drank alcoholically in their college days, but I don't believe they were truly alcoholics, not to the level that I was the very first time I drank. And so I can't imagine that with drug use, that it can be helpful. We put people to sleep when there's a lot of pain. They induce comas whenever the body needs a lack of stress. So I think there's a place for it. And now
Yeah.
and the decriminalization of it, I think is actually a good thing personally.
Well,
But
I will tell you this, Kristina, and I'm just gonna lay it on the
do
line
it.
here. I have found through being in recovery and helping people in recovery that not everybody that enters recovery is an alcoholic or drug addict.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
I find this is what I've found lately. And I think that this leads into this too, because I think this is an important fact. There are a lot of people who are addicted to substances. Like, they're addicted to alcohol,
Hmm.
but they're not an alcoholic.
They're physically
Okay.
addicted
After
to
you
it.
get them sober, yeah, they're physically addicted, but after you get them sober and you sort things out, they maybe they were bipolar. I'm just giving an example, but they were using alcohol to treat it. But then after that, it's really they're dealing with a mental health issue. They're not dealing, and alcoholism is a mental health issue. I'm gonna put that out, but it's not, it's different than bipolar disorder, or they have some sort of personality disorder or something, right?
Right.
Something's going on, or they had a trauma, or they had something else, and they haven't necessarily crossed the line yet. And what happens is a lot of people will come into recovery and they'll, quote, be sober, and they
Right.
are, and they're doing the deal, right? And they see a benefit, but they're not really alcoholics. And then they go do things like this and it doesn't have the same impact. Whereas you take somebody who's an alcoholic and drug addict and you put them in this situation and they do the exact same thing. They do the California sober thing and
Right.
they get wiped out in
Yes.
30 days, 15 days. We've seen this, right? And they're
Sure have.
baffled. Because one of the things that we know about addiction is it's cunning, baffling, powerful, and patient. And,
Yes.
it waits for things like this to pop into the frame to be able to take you out.
It's so true. I do remember in my early days watching somebody who had 10 years of sobriety and had fallen off the wagon. And she wasn't saying she was an alcoholic or not, but somebody asked her to describe it. And in detail, she described how she felt, where she was, what it felt like. And now I'm looking, at that point I was confused and I just thought, wow, that seems dangerous, but I didn't really know her. So I couldn't say if it was affecting her life. Now I look back and I think her obsession with the way it felt and where she was is probably an indication that alcohol was not her friend. But she was out there and she was actually attending an AA meeting, but was a drinker. So I guess I don't know, if I'm not walking in somebody's shoes, exactly what they're thinking, but I think you're correct. about the fact that it is dangerous to experiment. It is dangerous to go out there and experiment.
And at the same time, Kristina, I think that it's useful for certain people, right? Like,
Sure.
I want to always be, like I've changed a lot. Like I was very cut, and this is where I think that a lot of 12-step groups have gone off the rails, right?
Okay.
Is that they've taken this position as if they're doctors or if they know everything, right?
Wow.
And they've left no room, no air in the room for any kind of thought about how to move, how to do things differently, right? Like,
So true.
and we found this with the whole character defects thing. It's interesting because when we did that episode with Stacey Danford, I got some flack about that. Like I got people that said,
Really?
you know what? Oh my God. Yeah. We were even talking about it last night. Like, hey, you know what? This is not debatable. It is this or it's not. Like it is this or not this. And I go, well, no, because the language that was used at the time that it was written, they only had so much information, and it was beautiful and perfect just the way it is. I don't think it should change, but the thing is, I'm saying we know more information now, so our decisions can be a little bit different about how we approach things. And I think that there's some people that are they're so afraid that they might stumble upon something that the position that they've had for years is going to be wrong, and it threatens them. Right.
Sure.
And I think in recovery, we have to be open, but we also have to be guarded of our own recovery.
So true. And I wonder if rigidity is on those people's character defect list because to be so rigid, to be a perfectionist, to be that rigid for yourself and others speaks to that there are more things that need to be dealt with.
Absolutely. You know what, I'm so glad that we did this Vox article. We're going to put a link in to the show notes so everybody can take a look at it. And, but before we go on here, Kristina, with the show, because we've got much more show ahead, I wanted to address what we've got going on in the Recovered Life community on Clubhouse. Which we call Recovered Life Discussions. Guys, if you are not a part of this, you want to get a part of this right now. And we're going to start doing some replays here in between the Recovered Life show, which is exciting. It's a little change that we're going to be doing. So every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Kristina, Dennis, and myself bring you these Recovered Life discussions that we host exclusively on Clubhouse. And we've got 4 of them a week, and they range in the different topics. And we're going to jump into them in the TGIF Sober thing. We're going to talk about what we talked about this week. But if you're not part of that, you can access that and so much more by joining Recovered Life totally for free. And how you do that is we've got this great app that's on your mobile phone. It's a website. It's a community of like-minded people just like you. You can join for free. All you have to do is go to recoveredlife.us. That's recoveredlife.us. So Kristina, coming back, we have got TGIF Sober. Going to be coming back talking about everything this week in our recovery. So hold tight. We'll be back right after this break.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Welcome back to the Recovered Life Show, segment 2, TGIF Sober.
So
Here we
good.
are, April Fool's Division, April Fool's segment of TGIF.
So true. But before we start, I want to let everybody know this episode is being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors and people like you. Make sure to like, share, follow, and leave us a comment so that we can keep bringing content to you that you enjoy. Also visit info.recoveredlife.us. You can join the network or make a donation, which helps us to keep helping others. It is completely free to join the network. It's info.recoveredlife.us.
Yeah, we want you to join the conversation, guys. Thanks so much for mentioning the Recovered Life contributors, Kristina. There is a wealth of information there for free with people like you that are out doing the deal. I know you're a codependency coach, recovery coach, interventionist, and you're on Recovered Life all the time, having discussions with people and helping them navigate through things. What I love about the contributors is they all bring these individual things. And we've got a list of them on the info.recoveredlife.us site. And there's a bunch of them right there. And then, of course, in the network, if you join the network for free, you're going to get really just direct access to them, which I totally love. I mean, that's the one thing that I love about Recovered Life is that you could just get right in and ask a question.
Absolutely. And I love it when people direct message me on that app because I know that they're doing the deal and it ends isolation for us. You know, COVID really shook a lot of people. There are people who got sober in COVID and are still trying to figure out how to join groups and find their people. Your people are there. All right. They're not only me, but lots and lots of people that continue the conversations.
Well, exactly. And that's kind of what TGIF Sober is about. We kind of go over the week, Kristina. We
Yep.
talk about the week. And, this started actually on our Clubhouse discussions where we started to just say, hey, what did we learn in our recovery this week? And we thought this is such a great segment. We're going to actually move this to part of a show because it is really great because I didn't realize how much I was actually learning and taking away from my own recovery every week from these discussions.
They are amazing discussions. And this Monday, we started off with, the headline that happened at the Academy Awards. And it was such a great place for people to come and share their opinions, and share their thoughts and how it made people feel. For me, I watched the video once because I found it incredibly triggering. And alcoholics or people in recovery are triggered. And it was great to be able to just ask the question in a judgment-free zone where we are respectful of each other and listen to the fact that everybody was feeling a little confused by it and not happy and triggered. And that really, really made me feel like I'm not alone. And I was able to, hear from different people what it meant to them. And it's definitely to be determined. I know as a codependent coach, I felt bad for all of them. And I absolutely hated the idea that the night with so many people who work really, really hard, this is their Super Bowl, having it be tainted by that entire incident. That's where my heart and mind went. Wow, all the people who won the Oscar, the headlines aren't going to be Coda won Best Picture or anything. They were all about the incident. And it was awkward.
Will Smith did he suck the air out of the room there on that one.
Sure did.
It's interesting, the interesting discussion, recovery discussion, because if people are just listening to this show and they did not hear the Will Smith segment, we cut up all the different segments and we put them on Recovered Life and on all the social channels. But one of the things that was interesting is we were talking about impulse control and my old school group yesterday, we had a whole gathering about impulse control and about what's going on with that, right? And people in recovery. Now, we're not saying that Will Smith is in recovery. I don't believe he is, anyone in there. But it was just a good framework, a good model to say it's like, what happens if you've gone too far? Look, because everybody in recovery has gone too far. They've said stuff they don't want to do. They have they're struggling with impulse control. We sometimes think impulse control just haunts people in early recovery or when they're using. That's not necessarily true.
It isn't true. And having the ability to have compassion towards somebody's humanity, I mean, we can give it to each other and we can give it to ourselves. I've got to tell you that if I had a camera of how many millions of people were watching on some of my worst moments, I would be horrified. I really would be. It's like everybody has those moments. And I think our world tends to wait for it and, the fodder of it, and can be really, really cruel. And so I tried very, very much to, take care of myself and stay in my own lane.
Absolutely. I think there's so many great things that people in recovery can learn from this. One is the impulse control. 2 is the how to make an amends effectively. And 3 is how not to get yourself into this situation. Right. Is that, one of the things that it was interesting that the group talked about in the discussions is that we talk about that pause button. It's like, I might feel like I want to go up there and slap you, but it's like, pause, hitting that pause button. And, and I think that was the big thing that refreshed, because I hadn't heard that for a while. I gotta be honest with you. Like when you work with newcomers, are people like you and I do a lot of transitional
Yes,
work where we're dealing with people who are just getting into the sober lifestyle, and that is a big thing.
it is.
Is that pause? It's like, hey, I know you want to say that to your boss, but put a pause on that, write it down, and then let's talk about that, because most of the stuff that's on this list that you wrote down, 80 to 90%, you're not going to say, and it's
No.
worthless,
No,
right?
and the pause button has saved my tail because I tell you not, like my brain can go there. And the whole idea that I don't create more wreckage because I've learned how to pause
Ugh.
is where I live in, right? It's totally where I live in. And it's
Well,
to be,
Kristina, you should have sent the pause button to me last night,
yeah,
because
okay.
I'm not always great with the pause button.
Well, you got to have some margins. You've got to, when we're up against, because we've pushed way too hard, it's so easy to slip off. It's so easy to slip off into behavior that will not help you in the future. I remember working with somebody and we were discussing her anger. And I said, I understand the anger, but I also hate how much it costs you to have the anger. Like it really is a self-care issue and
Yes.
not getting yourself into those situations.
Well, talking about not getting yourself into situations, we've got this great room on Tuesday where we talk about the
Yes.
brain neural patterns. Tell me a little bit about what happened on that room. I was doing some traveling this week, so I couldn't make it to all the
Oh,
rooms.
it was phenomenal. We did discuss several emotions that are painful, but I think the takeaway for me was that hope is not a warm, fuzzy feeling. And we referenced Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart to discuss these feelings. I think that before I heard that, I really did think it was, people were hopeful or they were hopeless. And the truth is, and I loved how this was written in her book, that hope is actually a cognitive process. And I never had heard that. It's about the thinking, and it's something that we can learn. We usually learn hopelessness from our caregivers as children. We learn the habit of hopelessness from patterns that we've observed. I love the idea of what she called hope habits. And there are 3 parts of cultivating hope and 3 areas in which you can look and see. So it's a cognitive process, but where hope begins with is 1, setting realistic goals. Addicts don't like to set realistic goals.
Mm.
Grandeur. We like to think very, very big, but setting realistic goals, which is what I think a coach, a therapist, or a sponsor can help you with. 2, be willing to fail. Have a path, but not just one path to get to your goal. Have 3, 4, 5, 6 different paths, and have the fortitude that just is not the way it worked. Not that my goal is wrong. I have a path and I'm going to get to it. And then the third one, of course, is believing we can get to it. And all 3 of those parts, like I am going to take that away with me for the rest of my life, where I feel like, oh, it's never going to work. Hopelessness sneaks its way in. I can start thinking about, no, I need 3 different things. I need a realistic goal. I need a path to get to it. And I need to work on my self-esteem right now, call somebody, whatever, and take and see that I am the person who can get it done. Did you think hope was a feeling?
It's interesting because I didn't really even think about it.
Right.
I didn't really go that far with it, but I did catch a part of that room. And I think that the thing that, by listening to the replay of it, is the interesting thing is I started to honestly kind of think about my own hope. It's like, am
Yes,
I kind of a glass? Somebody told me this weekend, they said, Damon, you're so optimistic.
you
You
are.
believe that like anything can happen. But it's funny because I feel like sometimes I'm jaded. I come across kind of jaded.
Nope.
And but I'm not actually. I'm really at heart. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, right?
Right.
Like I believe that anything can happen. We're gonna create it. Let's go do it, right? Like so it's interesting. I hadn't really dived into hope that deep, but I see it. I see what she's saying about that, and by
Hmm.
listening to people's experiences, I totally, I found a better way to be that I could use hope in my life more constructively.
Right, right. And isn't getting sober all about hope? We have a goal to stay sober. We find people who teach us the path. right? We work on ourselves to know that we can, because we have examples of people who have done it before us. I mean,
Yeah.
being sober is being hopeful. And so if you've felt hopelessness, I want you to think about the 3 Ps. The first one is that this is permanent. How often does that happen? That happens all the time. The second one is it's personal. It's about me. And the third one is that it's pervasive. I think that because one mistake has been made or one area of my life isn't working well, I think my entire life doesn't work well. And so if you find yourself being hopeless, it's super important that you figure out the triangle of hope, the 3 things. What is my actual goal? How can I get there? And how can I believe in it myself that I'm the one who can do it?
Well, this is this is one of the things that I think recovery gives us is when you're talking about this thing about believing that you can do it, right? Like I do believe that you have to develop what I'm just going to call fortitude,
Yes,
right? In
use that word.
recovery is that no matter what, and I told somebody this yesterday. I said, it's all going to work out because like everybody goes through things where there's about, where I look at hope is like, well, things aren't going the way that I planned. And I love what you said about that. The last thing that you just said about if one thing's not going well, it's all not going well. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is pervasive with people in recovery, this black and white thinking.
Yes.
And I'm going to say that I've suffered from that a lot as well. Is that this like, well, this one area is not going well, so everything else is not going well. And I have people laugh at me. Like I've been telling everybody, like I woke up a little late today.
Yes.
I texted you. I was like, oh my God, this isn't going to work. We're not going to, I already started. And I was like, I was 5 minutes late. It's not like the end of the world.
Not at all.
Right?
Not at all. And the pervasiveness is a lie. And I think that's what I love about knowing what hopelessness is all about. Being hopelessness, it's interesting with despair and hopelessness. Now, with despair, they always use the word, researchers, social scientists always use the word hopelessness with despair. Always. Your hopelessness,
Yes.
are hopeless and despair. Now, they don't always use despair with hopeless. And so if you're feeling hopeless, look at the 3 Ps and decide which one of those is really, the base of this. How can I
Yes.
change that? If you think it's happening to your whole world and you need a new perspective, call somebody. They will often, and like I've been laughed at too for feeling like everything was wrong, that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, I had that feeling. And so people getting a perspective outside of yourself can really, really help. And you
I
can
love that room.
stop it. You can stop it.
I mean, I think some of the most engaging sobriety life changing for me, like, wow, I'm going to look at this different, I'm going to practice this, have come out of that Tuesday
It's a
neuroscience
great
room.
room.
Because I think that the neuroscience, we were just talking about this for the last segment about not being closed down totally to different situations. The neuroscience room is good because it gives more of a psychological meets motivational practical thing about what I can do in the here and now to further my sobriety. Because I believe, and we'll talk about my Thursday room in a little bit. I believe that most of this is consciousness. It's being able to tap into a consciousness where you can live your best recovered life. It's not about, and that has to do a lot of the times with letting go of things. It doesn't have to do with obtaining anything.
So true. And once we understand that there's biology involved, we can make it less personal. We can quit feeling like we're defective humans because there's so many everyone in the world is feeling this way in some way. And everyone has these thoughts of hopelessness or once hopeful, activities. You can cultivate them. You can, you're the thinker of your thoughts, not your thoughts. And so
Absolutely.
that mindfulness and that self-awareness can be a bridge to get you your best recovered life.
Now, Wednesday, I jumped onto a discussion that you were having about setting healthy boundaries, which you do every Wednesday.
Yes.
Which is probably one of our most popular discussions that we have. What was the big discovery you had with that room?
Well, we talked about experimenting. In codependency, there's several seasons. In recovery, there are seasons. There's a time in which you need to be introspective. You need to look at your past. You need to figure out, your belief systems. You take a lot of time, maybe sitting on your hands. A good codependent, inaction is actually the right action. However, there's also a time where we need to experiment. We need to figure out who we are. And so in that room, we challenged people to have an experiment that day, because there is a season where you need to go out there. Yes, we look at ourselves. Yes, we spend time being quiet, but we also need to figure out who we are. And I loved the discussion because there is freedom in codependency. A lot of people think boundaries mean that, there's a line and you don't cross it. No, boundaries are the rules in which a relationship engages, right? And so often, the Tuesday and Wednesday room discuss it as well about, we're coming up on it this next Tuesday about boundaries. Boundaries are like, it's an okay, it's not okay list.
Mm.
And so what is okay is helpful. And we often just focus on what's not okay. But really, we need to be looking at what's okay. And many of us have shut down lives where we don't even know what our favorite color is. We don't even know what kind of, things we
That's
like.
so true. That is so, oh my gosh, it's like sober and dead, right?
Yes.
Like sober and dead. It's just like no more fight left. I call this stuck in the church basement thinking, like just
Yes.
stuck.
Yes. And, the most interesting thing about us is not that we quit drinking. We cannot spend our lives thinking about and talking about the thing that we haven't done for 20 years or 30 years or 5
Yes.
years. We need to go out and live life. And so that was what Wednesday's room was all about experimenting, trying new things, figuring out who you are, and realizing that that's the next step after you've done the introspection.
Yeah, I love that because, I think it is about trying new things and not being so locked into stuff. I mean, I'm going to tell you honestly, I suffer from that. Like, I think, well, this
Mhm.
is the way, this is the only way, but it's not, and I think, somebody told me a long time ago in recovery, probably the first couple weeks is to say, your plan it has this many options and God's plan has this many options, unlimited
Right.
options. Which one would you pick, right? Do you want
Yes.
something that's got a lot of options? And I have used that. It's interesting. I'll fight it. Like I'm one of these people. I'll fight it, fight it, fight it, fight it, fight it. And then I'll realize it's like, why am I fighting this? I know that it's going to be okay. I just have to do the work, what's in front of me. But this just comes into the hope and it comes into faith
Yes.
and we were talking about this. It's weird. We had a different metaphysical conversation about the same thing on Thursday in my
Yes.
unstuck room, and we said, "Is awareness the key to is the key to change? Is awareness the key to change?" And I have to tell you, that was one of the most powerful unstuck rooms that I have done.
Wow. Wow, I wasn't able to make it, so I'm
It
really
was
glad
really
that you're
great. It
sharing
was
about
really
it.
great because people were talking about, we talked about awareness.
Mhm.
Is it really the key to change? Because I think people think that willingness is the key to change. Like so many people look, I think every coach or everybody in recovery is trying to find what is that magic thing that has to happen with people for them to have the awareness to be able to get sober or to
Right.
make huge changes in their life, right? I think every high performance person is trying to figure out, okay, what's that magic combination, right? And we're
Mhm.
talking, a lot of people just think it is a willingness, but I know a lot of people who are willing to do things, right? They have the willingness, but they don't have the consciousness. They don't have the
Exactly.
awareness, right? And I think that most of recovery is building an awareness of who you are and what you're not. And we talked a lot about the whole, that recovery is not it's not a self-improvement
Correct.
journey. It's really a self-abandonment journey, right? We're trying to let go of things
Right.
that are that we believe that no longer work for us.
Outdated
And
belief systems.
absolutely. And what was interesting about that is we had some people on stage that were sharing their awareness and about how their awareness has changed over the years.
I'll tell you, the way I liken that is if everybody's gone to a mall and you figure out where you wanna go. Well, you can't get there until you find that "You are here" button. You really can't. So awareness is finding out where you are. Who are you? This is where I'm at before you can get to go anywhere. And so I might be really willing to go to Nordstrom's, but if I don't know where I am in that mall, I can't find the way. And I love that vision because it really, really helps my clients to figure out, oh, this is where I am. Our first steps when I'm working with somebody is self-awareness. I absolutely
Yeah.
agree with you.
Well, and we were talking about how the willingness morphs into acceptance. And then
Yes.
through that acceptance, we then create a bigger awareness of who we are and where we fit in and what's going on, right? But you have to have that acceptance as well, because you could be willing, there's so many people that come in and say, hey, you know what? I have an alcohol and drug problem, or I have an eating disorder, I have something, right? And they see it, they see the car crash, right?
Yes.
Because I think that's a big question. And I know you as an interventionist, you see this a lot, Kristina, is that it's people are like saying, well, how can they not see what's going on? It's like, no, it's like, we see the car crash.
Right.
We see that it's messy. We see that there's like a crime scene there. Like we get that. It's just that the ability to be honest with ourselves, right? With people in addiction, is to be able to say, this is related to my abuse of this, right? Like,
Right.
we can't make that connection. We're talking about this committee that comes in that's really fighting with us 24/7 to tell us that the reality is not the reality, right?
Right.
It gaslights us
Yes.
this whole time. So how do you move through these stages? And it's not just, we go through this day in, day out. We're talking about this with the show. How do we move our consciousness to a place where it's a higher level of consciousness? It's not just about drinking, not drinking. It's not really about that at all. It's about how do we raise our consciousness higher and higher and higher to be able to experience new things.
Oh, I love it. I love that that was the topic. These are the kind of discussions that happen in Recovered Life discussions. We really, really speak about the things that are beyond just not doing something.
Absolutely. Guys, this has been a really great show, Kristina. April Fools, no fooling.
Yep,
Great
no
time.
fooling.
Great time. So go play a practical joke on somebody. Make sure it's funny. I would say make sure it's funny and not
harmful.
Not going to scare them, not harmful. So episode 93, Friday, April 1st in the can. We're going to come back Monday. We got a great show Monday. We've already planned it out. And we hope to see everybody on Recovered Life. It's such a great community, guys. So if you're not part of it, please join. You can get there by going to recoveredlife.us. That's recoveredlife.us. Kristina, have a great weekend. Episode 93 in the can.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.